I clung to my husband's arm at the departure gate, forcing tears until a stranger offered me a tissue. He smiled, believing I was heartbroken over his 2-year assignment. He did not know I had seen him with his mistress 3 days ago, and he certainly did not realize that while he boarded his flight, I had already drained $650,000 from our joint account and signed the divorce papers. My name is Alice Lawson, and standing there in the bustling departure hall of Reagan National Airport, I was delivering the performance of my life. I clung to the lapels of my husband's charcoal gray blazer as if gravity were failing and he was the only thing anchoring me to the earth. I let my shoulders tremble just enough to be felt, not seen, and forced a shallow, ragged breath to catch in my throat. Ethan Mercer, my husband of 5 years, looked down at me with that practiced, pitying smile I had come to know so well. It was the smile of a man who believed he held the entire world, and specifically me, in the palm of his well-manicured hand. He brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "It is going to be okay." "Alice," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring, pitched perfectly for a public farewell. "It is just a 2-year assignment, 24 months. That is nothing in the grand scheme of our lives. Think about the promotion. Think about the house in the Palisades we talked about." I buried my face in his chest to hide the fact that my eyes were dry. I sniffled loudly. "I know." I whispered into the wool of his coat. "I am just going to miss you so much." A woman standing near the check-in kiosk, dragging a floral suitcase, looked over at us with sympathetic eyes. She reached into her purse and tentatively offered me a travel pack of tissues. She clearly saw a heartbroken wife saying goodbye to her hard-working husband. She saw love. I took the tissue with a shaky hand and dabbed at my face, careful not to smudge the waterproof mascara I had applied specifically for this moment. "You have to go," I said, pulling back slightly but keeping my grip on his arms tight. "You will miss your flight." Ethan checked his watch. "The flight to Montreal departs in 40 minutes, he said. "I should get through security." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. A chaste, lingering contact meant to seal the deal. "I will call you tonight as soon as I settle into the corporate apartment," he promised. "Video call. Every night. I promise." I watched him turn and walk toward the TSA pre-check line. He moved with the confident stride of a man unburdened by conscience. He did not look back. Not once. A man who loved his wife would have turned for one last wave. A man who was running away to start a new life with his mistress would keep his eyes fixed on the horizon. I stood there until he disappeared behind the frosted glass barriers. I counted to 10 in my head. 1, 2, 3, then I dropped my shoulders. The tremble vanished from my body instantly. I straightened my spine, smoothed the front of my navy dress, and tossed the unused tissue into the nearest trash can. The Weeping Willow act was exhausting, but it was necessary. He had to board that plane believing I was the same naive, dependent Alice he had been managing for the last half-decade. I walked out of the terminal and into the humid Virginia air. I hailed a taxi, sliding into the back seat with a sigh that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with relief. Old Town Alexandria. "Please," I told the driver. The ride was quiet. As we crossed the bridge, I watched the Potomac River glitter under the afternoon sun. Most women in my position would be hyperventilating. Most women would be screaming, but I had done my screaming 3 days ago, in the privacy of my car. After watching Ethan walk out of a cafe with Vera Langford, I had seen the way he held the door for her. I had seen the way they laughed, a shared, intimate sound that made me feel like a ghost in my own marriage. Now, I felt nothing but a cold, crystalline clarity. The taxi dropped me off in front of our brownstone. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet hallway. It smelled like lemon polish and deception. I walked into the living room. It was tidy, just as he liked it. And there, right by the entryway console, sat a pair of his leather slippers. He had left them there intentionally. It was a prop, a calculated visual cue to reassure me that he was coming back, that this was still his home. I looked at them and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Nice touch." "Ethan," I said to the empty room, You really committed to the bit." I kicked the slippers aside and sat down on the beige sofa he had picked out. I pulled my phone from my purse and opened the banking app. Face ID recognized me, and the screen loaded. I stared at the number in the center of the screen, $650,422.18. It was a staggering amount of money. For 5 years. Ethan had insisted on a strict financial plan. "We live on my salary. Alice," he had said, "we save yours, every cent of it. We put it in the high-yield joint account for our future, for the dream house, for the kids." I had listened. I had been the dutiful partner, depositing my paycheck month after month, year after year, driving a 6-year-old car and clipping coupons while he built this nest egg. Except it wasn't a nest egg. It was a severance package he didn't know he was about to pay out. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. The plan was simple. Move every single penny into my personal account at a different bank, effectively freezing him out before he landed in Canada. But something made me pause. A gut instinct honed by years of managing logistics in my own career. Ethan was a meticulous man. He was a project manager. He did not leave things to chance. Why was the balance exactly $650,000? It felt too round, too clean. I tapped on the transaction history, scrolling back past the recent deposits. Most of the transactions were standard. My salary deposits, interest payments. But then I saw it. A withdrawal from 2 weeks ago, then another one from 4 weeks ago. They were listed as Vantage Strategic Consulting LLC. $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. I frowned. Ethan had never mentioned an investment in a consulting firm. I tapped on the details. The recurring payments had started 6 months ago. Before that, the account had grown steadily. Since then, it had been leaking. I did the math in my head. He had siphoned off nearly $50,000 in half a year. I opened a separate browser window and searched for the LLC. No website, no LinkedIn profile. Just a registered agent address in Delaware. It was a shell. He wasn't investing. He was moving money out, slowly, testing the waters to see if I noticed. He was building his own escape fund using my money, likely to set up his life with Vera in Montreal. If I drained the account now, he would get a notification. He might panic and close whatever side channels he had set up. I needed to know where that $50,000 had gone. I needed the full picture. The money in the joint account was the bait, and he was not the only one who knew how to set a trap. I closed the banking app. I would not transfer the money this second. Not yet. I needed to let him land. I needed him to feel safe, to think he had gotten away with it. I opened my encrypted messaging app and found the contact simply listed as G. I typed a single message. "He is on the flight. Do not let me lose track of him." I hit send and watched the delivery receipt turn into a read receipt. Rising from the sofa, I walked into the master bathroom. The fluorescent lights were harsh, unforgiving. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired. Yes, but her eyes were hard. I grabbed a cotton pad and the bottle of makeup remover. I soaked the pad and pressed it to my eye, wiping away the waterproof mascara, the foundation, the carefully applied blush. 1 swipe, 2 swipes, the grieving wife disappeared. The face underneath was pale, but the jaw was set. I tossed the dirty cotton pad into the trash, right on top of a receipt for a dinner Ethan had claimed was a client meeting 3 weeks ago. I leaned in close to the glass, staring into my own pupils. "Crying is done," I whispered, my voice echoing slightly against the tile. "It is time to settle the score." To understand the sheer magnitude of the performance I had just delivered at the departure gate, you have to rewind the clock exactly 72 hours. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of crisp, golden day in late autumn that usually made me feel hopeful. I had left my office at the Stonegate Meridian Group 2 hours early, pleading a migraine. But in truth, I simply wanted to surprise Ethan. I had planned to stop by his favorite bakery, pick up a box of those maple-glazed scones he pretended not to love, and have dinner ready before he walked through the door. I was driving past a boutique coffee shop on King Street, waiting for a red light to turn green. When I saw them, they were walking out of the cafe together, laughing. Ethan was holding the door open, his body angled toward her with an attentiveness that made my stomach drop through the floorboards of my car. And she was Vera Langford. I knew Vera. She was a junior associate at his firm, a woman with bright eyes and a laugh that was always a little too loud at the company Christmas parties. I had stood next to her at the buffet table last year. I had complimented her shoes. I did not honk. I did not roll down my window and scream. Instead, I let the car idle, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of bone. I watched as she reached up to brush something off his lapel, her hand lingering there for 3 seconds too long. Then I saw it, glinting in the afternoon sun on her wrist. It was a delicate gold bracelet with a singular teardrop-shaped charm. My mind instantly flashed back to a credit card statement I had filed 3 weeks prior. Ethan had listed a charge of $400 at a jewelry store under client appreciation gifts. When I had asked him about it, he had looked me dead in the eye and told me it was a retirement gift for the wife of a major account holder. He had bought his mistress jewelry with our money, and he had looked me in the face and lied about it with the ease of someone discussing the weather. The light turned green. I drove on. I did not buy the scones. That night, Ethan came home at 7 o'clock, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. He kissed me on the cheek, his lips warm and dry. "Sorry I'm late," he said, heading straight for the refrigerator. The strategy meeting for the Montreal project dragged on forever. You know how Peterson loves to hear himself talk. I sat at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. I watched him. I really looked at him. There was no flicker of hesitation in his eyes. No nervous tick, no guilt. He was pouring himself a glass of water, complaining about his boss, completely relaxed in the sanctuary of his deception. That was the moment the heartbreak curdled into something colder. It wasn't just that he was cheating on me, it was that he was so terrifyingly good at it. If he could lie about where he was, what else was a lie? Was the Montreal project even real? Was the promotion real? The next morning, while Ethan was in the shower, I made a phone call. I did not call a marriage counselor. I called a number a discreet friend from law school had given me years ago, just in case. Gavin Rourke was the kind of private investigator who did not have a website and did not advertise. We met in a diner 2 towns over during my lunch break. He was a man of few words, with eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human disappointment. I told him everything: the coffee shop, the bracelet, the upcoming 2-year assignment in Canada. Gavin listened, stirring black coffee. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice low and gravelly. "Listen to me carefully. Mrs. Lawson," he said, "men who have a 2-year plan do not just have a girlfriend on the side. They have an exit strategy. If he is moving to another country without you for 24 months, he is not planning to come back to the marriage you think you have. Usually, in cases like this, there is money moving, there are papers being forged. He is not just hiding a woman. He is hiding a life. He told me to look for paper. Digital trails can be deleted," he said, "but men get sloppy with physical paper when they think they are home free." I went home that afternoon with a mission. I waited until Ethan went for his evening run. As soon as the front door clicked shut, I moved. I went into his study, the room he always kept locked, claiming it was for confidential client files. I knew where the spare key was hidden, taped underneath the bottom drawer of his old filing cabinet in the garage. I unlocked the door and went straight to the drawer where we kept our important family documents: birth certificates, marriage license, tax returns. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The hanging folders were neatly labeled. But when I pulled out the envelope containing our joint tax returns from last year, something felt wrong. The adhesive on the flap was bumpy. I held it up to the desk lamp. The paper fibers were torn slightly near the seal, as if it had been steamed open and then glued back shut with a glue stick. Why would he open a sealed copy of our taxes? I carefully pried it open. The documents inside were there, but one page was folded differently than the others. It was the schedule denoting interest income. He had swapped the page. The numbers didn't match the copy I had saved digitally on my work drive. He was altering the physical records to hide income. making it look like we earned less, likely to lower any potential alimony or asset division if we ever divorced. He was preparing for a split long before I even suspected a thing. I sat back in his leather chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. I checked his email on the desktop, but he had logged out. Smart. Then I checked the physical mail stack he had left on the corner of the desk. Junk mail, magazines, nothing from the bank. I remembered Gavin's warning about money moving. I logged into our joint account provider's website on my phone to check the settings. Just as I suspected, the preferences for mailing statements had been changed to paperless for every single account we shared. He didn't want paper statements coming to the house where I might see a withdrawal I didn't recognize, but even the most meticulous liar makes one mistake. I opened the top drawer of his desk, pushing aside pens and paper clips. Buried under a stack of sticky notes was a crumpled piece of thermal paper. It was a receipt, not from a store, but an automatic teller machine transaction slip. Ethan almost never used cash. He lived on credit points. I smoothed out the receipt. It was dated 4 days ago. The location was a gas station in a part of town we never visited, way out near the industrial park. But it wasn't the location that stopped my breath. It was the transaction type. Balance inquiry. But the account number ending in 4 digits at the bottom was not our joint account. It wasn't his personal checking account I knew about. It was a completely different account number, and the available balance listed was $42,000. $42,000 sitting in a ghost account while we supposedly saved every penny for our future house. I stared at that slip of paper. This was the mistake. He had changed the digital preferences, intercepted the mail, and forged the tax returns. But he had shoved a receipt into his pocket out of habit and forgotten to throw it away. I heard the front door open downstairs. Ethan was back. I moved with the speed of panic. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, crumpled under the sticky notes. I resealed the tax envelope and placed it back in the hanging folder. I locked the study door and ran to the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water just as he walked in, sweating and panting from his run. "Hey, babe," he said, grabbing a towel. "You look pale. You okay?" I drank the water, forcing the cool liquid to settle my stomach. "I am fine," I said, "just thinking about you leaving." I was not lying. I was thinking about him leaving. I was thinking about how I was going to make sure he left with nothing. That night, while he slept, I did not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the darkness. I mentally organized my next moves. I needed to act like a forensic accountant, not a scorned wife. The next day, I didn't go to lunch. I went to the photocopier. I began printing out everything I had access to. 5 years of my own pay stubs, my employment contract showing my salary progression, the transfer history from my personal account to our joint account. I created a folder on my encrypted cloud drive. I labeled it Project Montreal. I realized then that the war between us wouldn't be fought with screaming matches or thrown vases. It wouldn't be decided by who was right or who was wrong. This battle would be won by whoever held the most paper. And as I looked at the digital copy of that ATM receipt on my phone, I knew I had just found my first weapon. The manila envelope Gavin Rourke slid across the table at the coffee shop was heavy, but the weight came from the implications, not the paper stock. It had been 7 days since Ethan boarded that plane. 7 days of radio silence from me while he likely assumed I was pining away in our empty apartment. I opened the envelope. The first photograph was grainy, taken with a long-range lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. Ethan and Vera were standing on a cobblestone street in Montreal. They were not walking toward an office building. They were standing in front of a renovated brownstone with a for sale sign in the window. In the next photo, they were dining at a patio table. Ethan was throwing his head back in laughter, a glass of red wine in his hand. Vera was reaching across the table to feed him a forkful of dessert. It looked like a honeymoon. But the third photo was the one that made my blood run cold. It showed Ethan shaking hands with a man in a sharp suit outside a real estate office. Gavin tapped the photo with a thick finger. "That is Jean-Luc Bernier." He said, "High-end real estate broker. Deals exclusively in luxury leases and purchases in the Golden Square Mile. I stared at the image. Ethan had told me the company was putting him up in a serviced corporate suite. He is not renting a corporate suite. Alice, Gavin continued, his voice devoid of pity. He put down a deposit on a 2-bedroom condo, and he did not use his own money. Gavin pulled out a spreadsheet. He had traced the wire transfer I had spotted in the joint account. The money had left our bank, gone into the Vantage Strategic Consulting LLC account in Delaware, the fake company I had discovered earlier, and from there, it had been wired internationally to Bernier's brokerage firm in Quebec. He is laundering your marital assets to buy a love nest, Gavin said bluntly. The rage I felt wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. He was using the money I had earned, the money I had sacrificed vacations and new clothes for, to buy a home for another woman. I need a lawyer, I said, gathering the photos, not a mediator, a shark. Gavin nodded and wrote a name on a napkin. Noelle Hartman. She does not hold hands. She wins. Noelle Hartman's office was all glass and chrome, located on the top floor of a building that looked down on the chaos of the city. She was a striking woman with silver hair cut into a sharp bob that looked dangerous enough to draw blood. She did not offer me coffee. She did not offer me a tissue. She simply sat behind her desk, steepled her fingers, and listened to my summary for exactly 4 minutes. When I finished, she looked at me with eyes that assessed my value like an actuary table. "Stop crying," she said, though I wasn't crying. I mean inside. Stop thinking like a betrayed wife. The court does not care about your broken heart. The court cares about mathematics. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. You are going to stop being Alice the victim and start being Alice the chief financial officer of this divorce. I need a timeline. I need bank statements going back 5 years. I need proof of his adultery. Yes. But more importantly, I need to prove the source of funds. She circled the word source 3 times. If you can prove that the $650,000 in that account came primarily from your paycheck while he spent his on lifestyle maintenance, we can argue that he is dissipating marital assets. But we need to move fast. If he moves that money into a Canadian trust or buys property in a jurisdiction we can't easily touch, we are looking at years of litigation. She looked up at me, her expression severe. Where is the money right now? It is still in the joint account, I said, except for the $50,000 he has already siphoned. Noelle slammed her hand on the desk, a sudden, violent sound that made me jump. Get it out. Today. Now. But isn't that illegal? I asked. Won't the judge see that as me stealing? It is preservation of assets, she corrected, her voice cutting like shears. You are not spending it. You are moving it to a secure location to prevent further theft by a spouse who has already demonstrated a pattern of financial deception. If you leave it there, it will be gone by Monday. Go to the bank. Move every dime into an account solely in your name. Let him sue us for it. I would rather fight to keep the money you have than fight to recover money he has already spent. I stood up. I understood. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a hostile takeover. The branch manager at our bank knew me, or rather, he knew Ethan. Ethan was the one who usually came in to handle our investments, shaking hands and acting the part of the successful businessman. I was just the wife who waited in the lobby. I walked up to the teller counter. The young man behind the glass, whose name tag read David, smiled politely. How can I help you today? Mrs. Mercer? He asked. I slid my debit card and ID under the glass. I need to close the joint savings account and the joint checking account, I said, my voice steady, and I need to transfer the entire balance to my personal account ending in 442. David blinked. He typed something into his keyboard, and his eyebrows shot up. The entire balance? He asked. That is over $600,000, ma'am. For a transaction that size, I usually need both account holders present, or at least a call to verify. No, I interrupted. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of the last 3 days of hell. Read the account agreement. David, it is a joint account with rights of survivorship. Either party has full authority to withdraw funds without the consent of the other. It is in the terms and conditions. I checked. David hesitated. He looked at the screen, then at me. He was probably trained to look for signs of coercion, or maybe fraud. He didn't see a woman being coerced. He saw a woman wearing a tailored blazer and a look of absolute determination. I need you to execute the transfer. David, I said, today, before the close of business. He typed in a few more commands. I need you to enter your PIN to authorize. My hand did not shake as I reached for the keypad. I punched in the 4 digits, 1, 9, 8, 5, the year I was born, the identity I was reclaiming. I watched the screen, a spinning wheel, a pause that felt like it lasted a decade. And then, the words appeared in green pixelated text. Transfer successful. The receipt printed with a rhythmic zipping sound. I took it. The balance on the joint account was now 0. The balance on my personal account was a number that looked like freedom, but I wasn't done. Noelle had told me to think in minutes and seconds. I sat in the lobby of the bank, opening my laptop. The money was safe. But Ethan still had keys to everything else. He knew my passwords. He knew the answers to my security questions because he had set them up. What is your mother's maiden name? What was your first pet? I logged into my email, my retirement accounts, my credit card portals, one by one. I changed everything. I didn't just change the passwords to complex strings of random characters. I changed the recovery emails. I set up 2-factor authentication to ping a burner phone I had bought at a drugstore an hour ago. I went into the settings for the family cloud drive where we stored our photos and documents. I revoked his access. I saw his device, Ethan's iPhone, listed as online. I clicked remove device. I imagined his screen going black in Montreal. I imagined him trying to log in to check the balance for his next payment to the broker and seeing access denied. I closed my laptop. The air in the bank felt cleaner, lighter. My final stop was a 24-hour print and copy center 3 blocks away. I didn't want to do this at work, and I didn't want to do it at home where a printer log could be recovered. I had the files Gavin had given me and the files I had downloaded. I printed 3 copies of everything, the bank statements showing the transfers to the LLC, the photos of him and Vera, the fake business trip itinerary, the HR records I had pulled showing he was actually on unpaid leave, not assignment. I bought 3 thick, black binders. On the spine of the first one, I printed a label, evidence. On the second, timeline. On the third, assets. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the 3-hole punch was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I slid the papers into the rings and snapped them shut. These weren't just binders. They were the story of how Ethan Mercer had underestimated his wife. He thought he was writing a tragedy about a woman left behind. He didn't realize I was writing a legal thriller, and I had just finished the first act. I walked out of the shop into the fading daylight, clutching the binders to my chest like a shield. The crying was over. The accounting had begun. I chose a dress the color of a midnight bruise, a deep, unyielding navy blue, for my trip to the county courthouse. In the movies, divorce is often depicted as a single dramatic signature on a piece of paper, followed by a woman drinking wine and throwing her ring into the ocean. The reality, I quickly discovered, was a fluorescent-lit hallway smelling of floor wax and the crushing weight of administrative bureaucracy. Standing next to Noelle Hartman in the atrium, I felt small. The building was a monolith of limestone and judgment. You need to understand the geography of this fight. Alice, Noelle said, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor as we walked toward the clerk's office. If he were in an apartment 10 minutes away in Arlington, we could have a process server knock on his door by dinner. But he is in Montreal. That complicates everything. She stopped and turned to me, her face sharp and serious. We have to follow the Hague Service Convention. We have to translate the documents. We have to go through the central authority in Canada. It takes time, and in that time, he is going to realize the money is gone. I tightened my grip on my purse. Let him realize it. I said, he will not just realize it. Alice, he will retaliate. Noelle's voice dropped an octave, cutting through the ambient noise of the courthouse. The moment he sees that 0 balance, His lawyer will file an emergency motion claiming you stripped the marital estate. They will call it theft. They will paint you as vindictive and unstable. We have to file the complaint first. We have to control the narrative before he even knows the story has started. We reached the filing window. I looked at the stack of documents Noelle had prepared. The complaint was thick. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like a weapon I wasn't sure how to use. On the line for grounds for divorce, the text was typed in bold, uncompromising font: adultery, constructive desertion, dissipation of marital assets. I paused at the last one. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the betrayal of every morning I woke up at 6 to commute, every bonus I deposited, every dream I deferred so we could build a safety net that he turned into a trap. I signed my name. Alice Lawson. The ink looked black and permanent. We are also filing a lis pendens, Noelle added as the clerk stamped the papers with a violent thunk. If he tries to sell any property or move large sums, this puts a flag on it. We are freezing him in place. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a strange cocktail of nausea and power. I had just declared war. When I got back to the empty brownstone, the silence was deafening. It was the silence of a stage after the actors have left. But the props were still there. I went to the garage and grabbed a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. I walked into the bedroom and started with the closet. Usually, packing is a sentimental act. You hold a shirt and remember the date night he wore it. You hold a book and remember him reading it in bed. But as I pulled his suits off the hangers, I felt nothing but a clinical efficiency. I was not preserving memories. I was removing debris. I folded his favorite cashmere sweater, the one I bought him for our 3rd anniversary, and placed it in the box. I remembered him wearing it when he told me he had to work late. The same night I found a charge for a steak dinner for 2. The sweater didn't smell like him anymore. It smelled like a lie. I packed his history books. I packed his collection of vintage vinyl records. I packed the framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Hawaii. I looked at his face in the photo. Younger. Smiling. His arm draped protectively around me. I wondered if he was already planning his exit then, or if the rot had set in later. I taped the box shut. The sound of the packing tape ripping off the dispenser was loud and harsh, like a bandage being torn off. I wrote Ethan, office on the side with a thick black marker. I stacked the boxes by the door. The bedroom looked bigger now, cleaner. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a video call request. The name on the screen made my heart stutter. Not from love, but from the adrenaline of the performance I had to maintain. Ethan. I took a deep breath, pinched my cheeks to give them some color, and sat on the edge of the bed where the lighting was soft. I accepted the call. Ethan's face filled the screen. The connection was crystal clear. Behind him, through a floor-to-ceiling glass window, the Montreal skyline glittered like a jewelry box. "Hey, sweetie," he said. His voice was warm, the perfect pitch of a husband checking in. I finally got into the corporate apartment. It has been a crazy 48 hours. It looks beautiful, I said, forcing a smile. The view is incredible. Yeah, the company really went all out, he said, turning the camera slightly to show off the modern furniture, the sleek gray sofa, the abstract art on the walls. It is a bit lonely without you. Though, I wish you were here to see this. I watched him move through the room. It was a beautiful apartment. It was also completely staged. No company housing for a mid-level project manager looked like a penthouse suite. This was the condo from Gavin's photos. This was the nest he had built with my money, another prop. I thought, "So, how are you holding up?" he asked, settling back onto the sofa. The camera angle shifted, and for a split second, the lens caught the reflection of the coffee table in the glass window behind him. The image was reversed and faint, but unmistakable. Sitting on the low table, just out of the camera's direct frame, were 2 wine glasses. They were half full, red wine. He was alone. Supposedly, he was missing me. Supposedly, yet there were 2 glasses, and the second one had a faint smudge on the rim that looked suspiciously like the shade of lipstick Vera Langford favored. My stomach twisted. a physical rejection of his audacity. He was calling me while she was in the room. She was probably sitting right there, just out of frame, listening to him lie to his wife, holding her breath to keep from giggling. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I saw the glasses. I wanted to tell him I knew about the Vantage LLC, the fake assignment, the bracelet, the lies. I wanted to hold up the divorce complaint I had signed 2 hours ago and watch his smug face crumble. But then I heard Noel's voice in my head. Think in minutes and seconds. Do not win with emotion. If I confronted him now, he would hang up. He would start scrambling, moving whatever he could still touch, shifting credit lines, closing cards, erasing trails. He would go underground. He would know the game was up before I had secured my position. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I widened my smile. I am okay, I said, my voice steady. Just missing you. The house feels really big tonight. I saw his shoulders relax. He bought it. He thought I was still the foolish, devoted wife waiting by the phone. I am so tired, he said, rubbing his eyes. I think I'm going to turn in early. Big day tomorrow. Meeting the new team, I bet. I said, you should get some rest. Do not work too hard. I love you. Alice, he said. I love you too. I lied. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of the bedroom, staring at my own reflection in the dark phone screen. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from the sheer effort of suppressing my rage. I stood up and walked to the boxes I had just packed. I kicked the one labeled Ethan, MISC, as hard as I could. It slid across the floor and hit the wall with a satisfying thud. It wasn't enough. I called Noelle. It was late, past 8 in the evening, but she answered on the second ring. He called. I said, he is in the condo, and he is not alone. I saw 2 wine glasses. Good, Noelle said. Her voice was calm, anchoring me. Good? I asked, incredulous. He is drinking wine with his mistress while telling me he loves me. It is good because he is comfortable, Noelle explained. He feels safe. A man who feels safe makes mistakes. He gets lazy. He thinks you are blind. So he will stop looking over his shoulder. That is exactly where we want him. I looked at the empty side of the bed. I looked at the spot where his slippers used to be. I want to destroy him. Noelle, I whispered. No. Noelle corrected me gently but firmly. You want to dismantle him. Destruction is messy and emotional. Dismantling is systematic. We are taking him apart, piece by piece, asset by asset, lie by lie. Go to sleep. Alice, tonight, you did not win by screaming. You won by staying silent. I hung up the phone. I went to the bathroom and brushed my teeth, scrubbing until my gums tingled. I looked in the mirror. Noelle was right. The time for tears was over. The time for screaming was later. Right now, the most dangerous thing I could do was ask him if he was okay, and let him believe the answer was yes. I turned off the lights. The dark was no longer frightening. It was just cover. Win with procedure. I whispered to the empty room, and tomorrow, the procedure would begin in earnest. The digital drop from Gavin Rourke arrived on my encrypted server at 3 o'clock on a rainy Thursday afternoon. It contained a new batch of photographs and a dossier that turned my stomach not because of the romance it depicted, but because of the domestic banality of it all. In the first image, Ethan and Vera were pushing a shopping cart through a grocery store in Montreal. They weren't buying anything dramatic or romantic. They were buying bulk paper towels, a coffee maker, and a set of matching bath mats. It was the kind of mundane, synchronized shopping that married couples did. They looked settled. They looked permanent. The next series of photos showed them inside a furniture showroom, testing mattresses. Ethan was laughing, bouncing slightly on the edge of a king-sized bed, while Vera checked the price tag. But the third attachment was a scanned document Gavin had managed to photograph through a glass partition or obtain via his network. It was a visitor log from a law firm in downtown Montreal, followed by a photo of Ethan and Vera exiting the building holding a blue folder. Gavin's note attached to the file was brief and chilling. They are not just renting. They are filing for long-term residency sponsorship. The firm specializes in immigration and expatriate settlement. This is not a 2-year assignment. Alice, he is planting roots. I stared at the screen. The 2-year project story was a fabrication designed to buy him time. He intended to keep me in Virginia, waiting like a faithful dog, while he used our savings to build a permanent life in Canada. He likely planned to wait until I had burned through my own income maintaining our life here, or perhaps until the statute of limitations on abandonment became murky. Before filing for divorce from a jurisdiction where I could not touch him, I needed to verify the foundation of his entire lie, the job itself. I pulled the official assignment letter Ethan had given me out of the timeline binder. I had glanced at it a dozen times before, accepting it as fact. Now, I looked at it as an investigator. It was printed on heavy bond paper with the Stonegate Meridian Group letterhead. That was the massive conglomerate where we both worked. I in the logistics division, he in project management. We worked in different buildings and rarely crossed paths professionally, which made his lie easier to maintain. I placed the letter under the harsh light of my desk lamp. The logo looked right at first glance. But when I leaned in close, I saw the edges of the crest were slightly pixelated, as if a low-resolution image had been stretched too wide. The font used for the body text was Arial, but the footer was in Times New Roman. Corporate communications at Stonegate were notoriously strict about branding. They never mixed fonts. I scanned the signature at the bottom, Marcus Vane, Vice President of North American Operations. I compared it to a legitimate memo from Marcus Vane I had in my own inbox from the previous quarter. The curve of the V was different. The pressure points of the pen were wrong. This wasn't a contract. It was a collage. I realized I couldn't just guess. I needed confirmation. I logged into the internal Stonegate directory. I found the contact for the senior HR director, a woman named Linda who I had worked with on a charity committee 2 years ago. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly enough for a discreet conversation. I dialed her extension. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice was the picture of corporate efficiency. "Hi, Linda. It is Alice Lawson," I said when she picked up. "Do you have a quick second?" "Alice, how are you?" Linda asked. Her voice was warm, unsuspecting. "I am good," I said. "Listen, this is a bit awkward, and I need to ask you a huge favor. I am trying to sort out some tax paperwork for our joint filing, and I seem to have misplaced the hard copy of Ethan's transfer agreement for the Montreal assignment. The mortgage lender is asking for the specific start date listed in the system, and Ethan is stuck in meetings all day up there. Could you just peek at his file and give me the official date?" There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "Sure, let me pull up his record," Linda said. "1 second." The silence that followed stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. "That is strange," Linda mumbled. "What is it?" I asked, gripping the phone. "I am looking at his status," Linda said, her voice slower now, confused. "I don't show an international assignment code. Usually, those are flagged with a specific expatriate package." I closed my eyes. There it was. "What does it show?" "Linda?" I asked softly. "It shows he is on a requested unpaid sabbatical," she said. "Personal leave of absence. Effective starting last Monday. It is approved for 6 months with an option to extend. But, Alice, he isn't on company payroll right now. He is technically on leave." The room spun. Unpaid leave. He wasn't working. He wasn't earning a salary. He wasn't building his career for our future. He had quit his income stream entirely to live off the cash he had stolen from me, pretending to be the breadwinner while he played house in Montreal. The assignment was a complete fiction created to explain his absence and the move. "So, there is no Montreal project?" I asked, just to be certain. "Not that I can see in the system," Linda said, sounding concerned now. "And Marcus Vane wouldn't sign off on a project transfer without HR knowing. Alice, is everything okay?" I forced a laugh, though it sounded like glass breaking in my throat. "You know how chaotic their department is. Linda, they probably just coded it wrong in the system. I will have him call you to clear it up. Thanks so much." I hung up before she could ask anything else. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I immediately opened my email client. I drafted a formal email to myself, documenting the conversation with Linda, the date, the time, the exact quotes. I took a screenshot of the call log showing the duration of the conversation with the HR extension. Then I called Noelle. He is not working. I told her the moment she answered. The assignment is fake. He is on unpaid leave. He forged the transfer letter. I heard Noelle inhale sharply on the other end. Are you sure? She asked. HR just confirmed it, I said. He has no income. He is living off the marital assets he drained. This changes the entire strategy, Noelle said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, not a happy smile, but the smile of a general who just found a gap in the enemy lines. If he submitted that forged letter to any government agency for his residency application, he has committed fraud. If he uses it in court to justify his move, it is perjury, and more importantly, it destroys his innocent spouse narrative. He can't claim he moved for the benefit of the family when he secretly quit his job. She paused, then added, Alice, this is the smoking gun. He does not just look like a cheater anymore. He looks like a con artist. I looked at the fake letter on my desk. I looked at the photos of him buying bath mats with Vera. I finally understood the scale of it. This wasn't a crime of passion. He hadn't fallen in love with Vera and made a messy mistake. This was a premeditated extraction. He had planned to steal my money, pause his career, and vanish into a new life, leaving me with a mortgage I couldn't afford and a story about how he tried to make it work long distance. He wanted to steal my life. I saved the HR documentation into the folder marked Evidence. I renamed the file The Lie. He thought he was writing a tragedy, I thought, staring at his forged signature, but he forgot to check the credits. I was the one holding the pen now. The silence that had settled over my life after I moved the money and set the complaint in motion didn't last long. By Tuesday evening, my phone finally vibrated against the granite countertop. It was Tuesday evening, 2 days earlier. I had moved the $650,000 into escrow. The complaint was already drafted, signed, and queued for filing. I was in the kitchen, organizing the timeline binder, when my phone vibrated against the granite countertop. It was not a video call this time. It was a standard voice call, and the caller ID simply said, Ethan. I took a breath, hit the record button on the separate dictaphone Noelle had advised me to buy, and answered, Alice, what the hell is this? His voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the smooth corporate baritone of the project manager. Gone was the gentle, persuasive tone of the husband who just wanted to build us a dream home. This was a voice stripped of all pretense, raw with panic and fury. I assumed the process server in Montreal had found him. I do not know what you are talking about. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice level. Do not play dumb with me, he shouted, the sound distorting slightly over the line. A bailiff just showed up at the condo. You filed for divorce, adultery, and theft? Are you out of your mind? I am just protecting myself. I said, protecting yourself? You emptied the accounts. Alice, you stole $650,000. That is grand larceny. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and iron-tasting. He was flipping the narrative instantly. In his mind, he wasn't the man who had siphoned $50,000 to a shell company. I was the villain for taking back what was mine. I did not steal anything. I replied, my hand trembling slightly not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the confrontation. I transferred marital assets to a secure location to prevent dissipation. It is all accounted for. You left me with nothing, he screamed. My card got declined at dinner. Do you know how humiliating that is? You are trying to ruin me because you are insecure and jealous. You are going to put that money back. Alice, you are going to put it back right now, or I swear to God, I will bury you in legal fees until you are living in your car. The mask had fallen off completely. The 2-year plan wasn't about our future. It was about his comfort, funded by my labor. And now that the tap was turned off, the monster beneath the suit was thrashing. I will let the lawyers handle it. Ethan, I said, and hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone. My heart was racing, but my head was clear. He was scared. 10 minutes later, a text message arrived from an unknown number. Hi, Alice. This is Vera. I think there has been a huge misunderstanding. Ethan loves you. He is devastated. We are just colleagues working on a difficult project. Please, do not let money destroy your marriage. He is worried about the $650,000 because it was committed to a bond for the company. Please be reasonable. I read the message twice. Just colleagues. Yet she felt comfortable enough to text his wife. Misunderstanding. Yet she was with him when his card was declined. But the real gem was the number. $650,000. Ethan had told her the exact balance of our joint account. He had discussed our specific finances with her. A colleague would not know the dollar figure of my life savings down to the significant digit. I did not reply. I simply took a screenshot of the text, printed it, and punched 3 holes in the side. I filed it in the evidence binder under the tab marked Conspiracy. She had just handed me proof that she was an active participant in the financial scheme, not just a romantic bystander. The next morning, the war moved from the phone to the courtroom. I was at my desk at Stonegate Meridian, trying to focus on a logistics spreadsheet, when Noel called. He moved fast. She said, her voice crisp, his lawyer filed an emergency ex parte motion this morning at 9 o'clock. They requested an immediate freeze on your personal accounts and a court order for you to return the funds to the joint account. They argued that you are acting maliciously to starve him out while he is abroad on company business. My stomach dropped. Did he win? I asked. Noel let out a short, sharp laugh. No. Because we were ready. I showed the judge the forensic accounting of the deposits. I showed that 90% of the liquidity in that account came from your direct deposits over the last 5 years. While his income mysteriously went to expenses and cash withdrawals, I also showed the judge the transfer to the Vantage LLC. She paused for effect. The judge denied his motion. The money stays where it is until the final hearing. You essentially have a war chest, Alice, and he is fighting with an empty gun. I exhaled. A long, shaky breath. He had tried to choke me financially, to force me to crawl back to him for grocery money, and he had failed. But Ethan was not done. If he couldn't hit me in the wallet, he would hit me in the reputation. By lunchtime, the atmosphere in the office had shifted. I walked into the break room to get coffee, and 2 junior analysts from the sales division stopped talking immediately. They looked at the floor. They looked at their phones. They looked anywhere but at me. I poured my coffee and turned to leave. As I walked out, I heard a whisper, heard she cleared out his accounts and left him stranded in Canada. Poor guy is trying to work, and she went psycho. He was spinning the story. He was reaching out to our mutual colleagues, playing the victim, painting me as the vindictive, unstable wife who was sabotaging his critical international assignment. He wanted me to feel ashamed. He wanted me to feel isolated so I would retreat. I walked back to my desk. I did not go to the bathroom to cry. I did not confront the gossips. Instead, I opened my email. If he wanted to talk about his assignment, let's talk about it. I drafted an email to the HR department, copying the legal compliance officer. I kept the tone strictly professional, devoid of any personal drama. Subject: Verification of employment status. Ethan Mercer. Dear Human Resources Team, I am currently finalizing some domestic financial matters and require formal clarification regarding the employment status of Ethan Mercer. Please confirm for the record whether Mr. Mercer is currently on an active international assignment in Montreal, funded by Stonegate Meridian Group, or if he is on a voluntary leave of absence. Additionally, please verify if the assignment letter dated January 15th is a valid document issued by this office. Regards, Alice Lawson, Senior Logistics Coordinator. I hit send. This was a trap. If he had told his work friends he was on a big project, this email would trigger an internal compliance review when HR confirmed he was actually on unpaid leave and that he had potentially forged a company letter. The rumor mill wouldn't just stop, it would reverse. I wasn't just fighting the rumors, I was creating a paper trail that would destroy his professional credibility. That evening, I met Noelle at her office to hand over the recording of his call and the screenshot of Vera's text. She listened to the recording, her face impassive. When Ethan screamed, "I will bury you," she nodded. "This is good," she said. "It goes to character. He is abusive when he loses control." She looked at me across the desk. "Alice, we need to tighten your perimeter. He is desperate. A desperate man is dangerous. He knows he can't get the money legally, and he knows his reputation is about to take a hit." She handed me a list. "Change your locks today. Not tomorrow. Today. Install a doorbell camera that records to the cloud. Do not keep the binders in the house. Rent a safety deposit box or leave them with me. And if he calls again, do not answer. Let it go to voicemail. Every word he says is evidence. But only if you do not engage." I nodded. I felt like a spy in my own life. I spent the night installing the new smart lock on the front door. The mechanical whir of the deadbolt sliding into place sounded like a gate closing on a fortress. At 11:30 at night, my phone lit up one last time. It was a text from Ethan. No screaming this time. No long paragraphs of justification. Just 5 words. "You will pay for this." He meant it as a threat. He meant that he would make me suffer. I looked at the message. I thought about the $650,000 safe in my new account. I thought about the fake assignment letter. I thought about the wine glasses in Montreal. I typed back 3 words. "See you. Court." I blocked his number. Then I turned off the lights and went to sleep in the house I had paid for, ready for whatever dirty trick he would try next. The conference room in Noelle's office had become my second home. It was a sterile aquarium of glass and polished mahogany, a place where emotions came to die and were reborn as exhibits. Sitting across from me was not just Noelle, but a man named Silas, a forensic accountant who looked more like a weary math professor than a financial bloodhound. He slid a diagram across the table. It looked like a subway map, but instead of stations, there were shell companies. Your husband did not just move money to buy a condo. "Mrs. Lawson," Silas said, tapping the paper with a mechanical pencil. He was layering it. "The transfers from your joint account went into Vantage Strategic Consulting. From there, they were split. 40% went to the Canadian broker, but the other 60% bounced through 2 other LLCs, registered in Nevada and Wyoming before vanishing into a darker hole. He calls it structuring," Noelle added, her eyes cold. "It is designed to make the source of funds untraceable, so that when he claims poverty in court, we can't find the assets to disprove him." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Ethan wasn't just hiding money, he was building a labyrinth. Silas flipped a page, but that is not the part that concerns me the most. In my sweep of public records and credit inquiries associated with your Social Security number, I found this. He pointed to a line item on a credit report. "Mercer Lawson Ventures, Corporate Amex, opened 3 months ago." I stared at it. "I never authorized this. The billing address is listed as your old apartment on 4th Street, Silas said. "The one you lived in before you were married." My hand flew to my mouth. He had used my name and my credit history to open a business line of credit, and he had routed the statements to an address I hadn't set foot in for 5 years. He likely still had the mail key, or he had set up a forward. "What is the balance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Currently, it is 0, Silas said, "but the credit limit is $50,000. He has a loaded gun pointed at your credit score. Alice, he could max that card out in an hour in Montreal, and legally, since you are a listed officer of the company, the creditors would come for you." I did not wait for Noelle's permission. I pulled out my phone right there in the meeting. I called the credit bureaus. I called the credit card issuer. "I need to freeze everything," I told the operator, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and panic. "I want a fraud alert placed on my file. I want to dispute a card opened without my consent." I spent the next 40 minutes answering security questions, verifying my identity, and locking down my financial existence. I requested written confirmation of the freeze. noting the exact date and time to the minute. If Ethan tried to buy a single cup of coffee on my credit tomorrow, the terminal would scream at him. I hung up, feeling exhausted but fortified. I had just welded the bank vault shut. Then came the second blow. Gavin walked in, tossing a heavy folder onto the table. He looked smug, the look of a hunter who had just bagged a prize buck. "You were wrong about the girlfriend," Gavin said, sitting down. "Vera Langford. She is not just the mistress." "What do you mean?" I asked. Gavin opened his laptop and turned the screen toward us. It was a video, shaky, clearly taken from a cell phone across a crowded room. It showed Ethan standing at the front of a small conference room in a boutique hotel in Montreal. He was wearing his best suit. He was pointing at a projection screen that showed graphs shooting upward, sitting in the front row, nodding enthusiastically and taking notes. "Was Vera?" "He is pitching a private equity fund," Gavin explained. "He is telling these people, mostly wealthy retirees he met through the expat community, that he has a proprietary algorithm for real estate investment. He is promising 20% returns in 6 months. "And Vera?" I asked. "She is the shill," Gavin said. "She mingles with the crowd before the presentation. She tells them she has already invested $50,000 and has seen double-digit growth. She is the bait." I looked at Noelle. Her face had gone hard. "This is a Ponzi scheme," Noelle whispered, "or at least a high-stakes fraud. He is using the money he stole from you to front the initial costs, the suits, the dinners, the venue rental, to look successful so he can lure in bigger fish. If this blows up," I said, realizing the horror of it. "And he is still legally my husband. We could be liable for his debts if the investors sue." Noelle finished my sentence. "We need to sever the limb before the gangrene spreads." Noelle moved instantly. She drafted an emergency motion for the court, requesting a judicial freeze on the Canadian assets under a specific treaty for cross-border legal cooperation. She attached Gavin's video and Silas's flowchart. "We are arguing that he is using marital funds to facilitate criminal activity," Noelle said, typing furiously. "That goes beyond simple divorce law. That gets judges very angry." 2 days later, the pressure began to work. My inbox pinged with an email from Ethan. It wasn't the screaming rage of his phone call. It was soft. It was manipulative. Subject: "Can we talk?" "Alice, I am sorry. I snapped the other night. The stress of this new venture is killing me, and I took it out on you. I know I made mistakes. I know I should have been clearer about the finances. But please, do not freeze the accounts. You are choking the business just as it is about to take off. If you release the hold, I promise I will transfer half the money back to you by the end of the month. We can do this amicably. I still care about you. Let's not make the lawyers rich." I read it and felt a wave of nausea. He was trying to hoover me back in. He needed the cash flow to pay off the investors or to keep the illusion alive. The new venture he mentioned was the scam Gavin had uncovered. He thought I was still the woman who would melt at the words "I still care about you." I forwarded the email to Noelle with a single note. "Delay tactic. Proceed with the freeze." Ethan wasn't sorry. He was broke, and a broke con artist is a desperate animal. We spent the rest of the week in what Noelle called the war room. It was time to prepare for my deposition. Ethan's lawyer would be there. They would try to rattle me. They would try to make me look like the unstable one. Noelle forced me to go through the last 5 years of my life. Day by day, we built a master timeline on the whiteboard that spanned 3 walls. June 12th, 2021. Alice deposits bonus check of $4,000. Ethan withdraws $300 cash. August 3rd, 2023. Ethan claims business trip to Chicago. Credit card records showed dinner for 2 in Miami. It was grueling. I had to relive every lie. Every moment I had been blind. I had to look at the dates where I thought we were happy and overlay them with the dates he was funneling money to his LLC. I cried once when I realized he had missed my 32nd birthday dinner because of a work crisis that was actually a consultation with a divorce attorney he had paid for with our joint savings. Noelle handed me a tissue, but her voice was stern. "Get it out now. Alice, Cry here. But in that deposition chair, you do not cry. You do not get angry. You become a machine. If they ask you about his affair, you do not say, "He broke my heart." You say, "He spent $400 of marital funds on a bracelet for Ms. Langford." You turn every emotion into a data point. I wiped my eyes. I looked at the whiteboard. It wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a ledger. And the red ink was all on his side. By Friday afternoon, the timeline was complete. We had the bank transfers mapped. We had the fake job offer verified. We had the video of the investment scam. We had the credit card fraud documented. I stood back and looked at the wall. It was a masterpiece of deceit. Dissected and pinned down like a butterfly in a display case. "Ethan thinks he can charm the judge," Noelle said, standing beside me, her arms crossed. "He thinks he can tell a sob story about a supportive husband trying to build a business for his family, and a jealous wife who cut him off." She turned to me, and for the first time, she smiled, a genuine, wolfish smile. "Let him tell his story," Noelle said. "On the day we go to court, he will bring his charm and his excuses, but we are bringing the truth with a notary stamp on it. And in a court of law, paper beats poetry every single time. The war with Ethan had been a cold war, fought with documents, bank transfers, and silent glares across state lines. But on a rainy Tuesday evening in November, the war turned hot. I was sitting in my living room, the house quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator, when my phone buzzed. It was an international number. My heart did exactly what Noelle had told it not to do. It sped up. I assumed it was Ethan calling from a burner phone to scream at me again. I picked up, my finger hovering over the record button. "This is Alice Lawson," I said, my voice tight. "Good evening, Mrs. Lawson," a man's voice replied. He sounded nothing like Ethan. His voice was deep, clipped, and carried a heavy French-Canadian inflection. "My name is Inspector Luc Thorne. I am with the Autorité des Marchés Financiers in Quebec. That is the Financial Markets Authority. Do you have a moment to speak?" The air left my lungs. This was not a divorce lawyer. This was the government. "I am listening." I said, "We have opened an investigation into a series of irregular investment solicitations linked to a Mr. Ethan Mercer," Thorne said. "His name appears on several complaints regarding an unregistered equity fund. Your name is listed as a secondary officer on one of the associated entities, Mercer Lawson Ventures. Are you aware of these activities?" I gripped the phone. Noelle had warned me this might happen, but hearing it made the room spin. "I am not." "Inspector," I said, keeping my voice steady by sheer force of will, "I am currently in divorce proceedings with Mr. Mercer. I have reported unauthorized use of my identity to the credit bureaus here in the United States. I have a lawyer, Noelle Hartman, who can provide you with the documentation proving I have no involvement in his business dealings." There was a pause on the line. I could hear him typing. "I see," Thorne said. "That aligns with some of the discrepancies we are seeing. We may need to contact you again. Mrs. Lawson, do not leave the country without notifying us." He hung up. I sat there, staring at the rain lashing against the window. It had started. The house of cards Ethan was building in Montreal was already collapsing, and the debris was starting to fall on me. But the real shock came 48 hours later. I was at the Daily Grind, a small coffee shop 3 blocks from my house where I often went on weekends to catch up on work. It was my sanctuary. The baristas knew my order. It was the one place where I felt like the old Alice, not Alice the plaintiff. I was deep into a spreadsheet when a shadow fell across my table. I looked up. Standing there was a man I had never seen before. He was large, wearing a cheap leather jacket that smelled of stale cigarette smoke. His face was red, and his eyes were bulging with a mix of exhaustion and rage. "Alice Lawson?" he barked. It wasn't a question. I instinctively closed my laptop. "Who are you?" "My name is not important," he spat out. "What is important is the $20,000 your husband took from me for that guaranteed housing fund. He is not answering his phone, but I found you." He slammed a hand down on the table. My coffee cup jumped, spilling brown liquid onto the saucer. The chatter in the cafe stopped instantly. Every eye turned to us. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not shame, but a primal alert signal. This was the creditor Gavin had warned me about. Ethan had ghosted them, so they were coming for the next best thing. "Sir," I said, standing up slowly to keep the table between us, "I am legally separated from Mr. Mercer. I have no access to his business accounts. Do not give me that lawyer talk," he shouted. He pointed a thick finger in my face. "You are his wife. Your name is on the papers." He showed me. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a terrifying second, I thought he was pulling out a weapon. The barista behind the counter reached for the phone, but the man pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and shoved it toward me. "Look," he yelled. "Promissory note, signed by Ethan Mercer and Alice Lawson. You owe me my money." I looked at the paper. It was a crude contract, typed up on plain Word document formatting, and there, at the bottom, was a signature that looked remarkably like mine. My stomach twisted, but then I looked closer. Beside the signature, there was a typed line for Social Security number. I looked at the man. I took a deep breath. "Sir," I said, my voice loud enough for the witnesses to hear, "that is not my signature, and that is not my Social Security number. The last 2 digits are wrong." The man froze. He looked at the paper, then at me. "What?" he stammered. "My ID ends in 42. I lied effortlessly to protect my real data. That document lists 89. You have been defrauded, sir. But not by me. That document is a forgery." I picked up my phone. "I am calling the police now. I suggest you stay and explain to them how you obtained a forged financial instrument. Or you leave." The man looked around. He saw the barista on the phone. He saw the customers filming with their smartphones. The rage drained out of him, replaced by the realization that he had walked into a trap. He snatched the paper back. "Tell him I'm not done," he muttered, and then he turned and bolted out the door. I sank back into my chair. My legs were jelly. The customers were whispering. I heard words like scam and husband and police. My sanctuary was gone. Ethan hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen my safety. I packed my bag with shaking hands and left. I walked home, looking over my shoulder every 10 seconds. Every car that slowed down looked suspicious. Every shadow looked like a man in a leather jacket. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the lights on, listening to the creak of the house settling, convinced it was the sound of a window breaking. The next morning, I called Mark. Mark was a colleague from the IT security department at Stonegate. We weren't close friends, but he was the kind of guy who wore tactical watches and talked about encryption at happy hour. "I need help." "Mark," I said, "I need to turn my house into a fortress." He came over 2 hours later with a toolbox and a grim expression. We spent the afternoon installing cameras at every entry point. We put sensors on the windows. He set up a smart doorbell that uploaded video directly to a cloud server that Ethan couldn't access. "If anyone steps on your porch, you will get an alert on your phone and watch," Mark said, syncing the system. And I set up a panic protocol. If you press this button on the keypad, it bypasses the monitoring center and calls the precinct directly. I looked at the monitor in the kitchen. I could see the street, the driveway, the back alley. I felt safer, but I also felt like a prisoner. I went to Noelle's office later that day to hand over the police report I had filed regarding the incident at the coffee shop. "This is harassment," Noelle said, her pen tearing through the paper as she took notes. "And it is reckless endangerment by forging your signature and giving out your location to these loan sharks. Ethan is putting you in physical danger." She looked up, her eyes fierce. "We are filing for an emergency restraining order, not just against Ethan, but a blanket protection order that allows police to arrest anyone approaching you on his behalf. We are adding this to the dossier. It is no longer just financial fraud. It is criminal negligence." But the final twist came on Friday afternoon. I was in the middle of reviewing the camera feed. A squirrel had set off the motion sensor when Inspector Thorne called back. "Mrs. Lawson," he said. His voice was different this time, less accusatory, more urgent. "Inspector," I said, I already sent the affidavit to your office. I received it. He said, we have also analyzed the handwriting on the promissory notes provided by other complainants. The forgery is confirmed. But that is not why I am calling. I waited, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. We have connected Mr. Mercer's activities to a larger network operating out of a shell firm in Toronto. Thorne said, he appears to be a mid-level recruiter for a sophisticated pyramid scheme targeting expatriates. He is not the mastermind. Mrs. Lawson, he is a mule, Ethan, who thought he was a genius, was just a pawn, and because you are the one who alerted the banks and froze the assets here in the States. Thorne continued, the Crown prosecutor is not looking at you as a co-conspirator. He paused, and his next words broke the chains that had been tightening around my chest for weeks. We are listing you as a primary victim, Mrs. Lawson. We believe he was setting you up to take the fall for the initial debt while he moved the bulk of the funds offshore. You are not a suspect. You are the witness we need to nail him. I hung up the phone. The tears finally came, hot and fast, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Ethan had tried to frame me. He had tried to sell me out to criminals to save his own skin, but in his arrogance, he had underestimated the one thing that mattered. He thought I was just a wife. He forgot I was the one who kept the books. And now, the book was closing on him. The fluorescent lights of the Fairfax County courtroom hummed with a low, electric tension that felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a gladiatorial arena. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles turned the color of old ivory. Beside me, Noelle Hartman arranged her binders with the precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. Across the aisle, Ethan sat next to his attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. Ethan looked tired. The swagger was gone, replaced by a twitchy, cornered energy. He refused to look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson who had a reputation for suffering absolutely no nonsense. Mr. Sterling stood up to deliver his opening argument. He buttoned his jacket and projected his voice to the back of the room. Your Honor, he began, his tone dripping with manufactured outrage. We are here today because Alice Lawson is a vindictive spouse who, upon learning of her husband's challenging international assignment, decided to scorch the earth. She stripped the marital accounts of $650,000. She abandoned him in a foreign country without access to funds. She is painting a picture of fraud to justify simple greed. We ask the court to order the immediate return of all assets and to sanction Mrs. Lawson for financial abuse. He sat down, looking smug. He thought he had scored a point. Noelle did not stand up immediately. She let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, letting his words hang there until they started to stale. Then she rose. Your Honor, Noelle said, her voice cool and level. Mr. Sterling tells a compelling story, but in this courtroom, we prefer arithmetic. She signaled to the clerk to display the first exhibit on the monitor. It was a bar graph, stark and undeniable. This chart represents the income contributions of the Lawson-Mercer household over the last 5 years. Noelle explained, the blue bar is Mrs. Lawson's salary. The red bar is Mr. Mercer's. As you can see, Mrs. Lawson contributed 82% of the liquid cash deposited into the joint savings account. Noelle flipped to the next slide. It showed the flow of money, and this, she continued, shows where Mr. Mercer's money went. It did not go into savings. It went to cash withdrawals. It went to restaurants. And starting 6 months ago, it went to a shell company in Delaware called Vantage Strategic Consulting. Ethan shifted in his seat. We have traced the $650,000 Mrs. Lawson secured, Noelle said. It is sitting in a dedicated escrow account. She did not spend a dime. She preserved the estate. Mr. Mercer, however, spent $50,000 of marital funds to place a deposit on a condo in Montreal, a condo he intended to inhabit with another woman. Mr. Sterling jumped up. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained on the intent, Judge Patterson said. Peering over her glasses, stick to the facts. Ms. Hartman, gladly, Noel said. We call our first witness, Mr. David Thorne, the Director of Human Resources for Stonegate Meridian Group. Ethan's head snapped up. He looked at the back of the room as a man in a gray suit walked in. This was the ambush. Ethan evidently thought his fake letter would hold up, or that we wouldn't bother to depose a corporate director. Mr. Thorne took the stand and was sworn in. Mr. Thorne, Noel asked, is Ethan Mercer currently employed by Stonegate Meridian Group on an international assignment in Montreal? No, he is not, Mr. Thorne stated flatly. Can you explain his status? Mr. Mercer requested a voluntary, unpaid leave of absence effective January 15th. Mr. Thorne replied, he is not drawing a salary. There is no project in Montreal. Noel walked to the table and picked up the piece of paper, the letter Ethan had given me at the airport. She handed it to the witness. Do you recognize this document? Mr. Thorne? Mr. Thorne squinted at it, then frowned. This purports to be an assignment letter signed by Vice President Marcus Feigned. However, the formatting is incorrect. The logo is pixelated, and Mr. Feigned has confirmed via affidavit that he never signed this. This is a forgery. The courtroom went dead silent. The sound of a pen dropping would have sounded like a gunshot. Judge Patterson turned her gaze slowly toward Ethan. It was a look that could strip paint. Mr. Sterling looked at his client, his face flushing red. He had been lied to. Ethan had sent his own lawyer into court with fake evidence, but we were not done. Your Honor, Noel said, we have a motion to introduce evidence from a third party. The door opened again. A woman walked in. It wasn't Vera Langford. It was a sharp-eyed lawyer holding a briefcase. This is Ms. Klein, representing Vera Langford, Noel announced. Ethan turned pale. He gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Your Honor, Ms. Klein spoke up. My client, Ms. Langford, has been named in the investigative files regarding Mr. Mercer's financial activities. She wishes to cooperate fully with the court to demonstrate that she was manipulated by Mr. Mercer. She has provided a digital forensic download of her communications with him. She handed a USB drive to the clerk. We would like to play Exhibit G, Noel said. The clerk clicked a file. Ethan's voice filled the courtroom. It was clear, arrogant, and unmistakably him. Do not worry about Alice. Babe, she is clueless. I will go up there, set up the residency. And in 6 months, once the money is moved, I will file for divorce from Canada. She will be stuck in Virginia with the legal fees. Just sign the papers for the condo. I have the down payment covered. The recording ended. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched. He had built his entire strategy on the idea that I was the villain, and his mistress had just handed the judge a recording of him plotting to defraud me. Mr. Sterling stood up, but his heart wasn't in it. Your Honor, Ms. Langford is a scorned lover. This evidence is contextual. Contextual? Judge Patterson interrupted, her voice sharp. He explicitly discusses hiding assets and forum shopping for a divorce jurisdiction. That is not context. Counselor, that is premeditation. Gavin, who was sitting in the gallery, caught my eye and nodded. He slid a folder to Noel. We also have photographs, Noel said, piling on the pressure. These were taken on dates where Mr. Mercer claimed to be in late meetings here in the United States. In reality, he was in Montreal, signing documents with Ms. Langford. She displayed the photos, Ethan and Vera signing the lease. The timestamp on the photo matched a text message Ethan had sent me saying, "Meeting running late. Do not wait up." The lie was total. It wasn't just money. It was time. It was affection. It was reality. Judge Patterson leaned forward. She looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Mercer," the judge said. Her voice was deceptively soft. "You are claiming that the $650,000 in the joint account is marital property that you are entitled to share. Yet, we have evidence of significant funds flowing to entities controlled by you, and allegations of investment fraud from Canadian authorities. Can you explain to this court the source of the funds used for the deposit on the Montreal property?" Ethan opened his mouth. He looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling shook his head almost imperceptibly. If Ethan admitted the money came from the joint account, he admitted to dissipation of assets. If he said it came from investors, he admitted to the Ponzi scheme Inspector Thorne was investigating. There was no good answer. There was only the trap he had built for himself. Ethan closed his mouth. He said nothing. Mr. Mercer? The judge pressed. I assert my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Ethan whispered. A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. In a civil divorce case, pleading the Fifth is not a shield. It is practically a confession. It allows the judge to draw an adverse inference, meaning she can assume the worst possible answer is the truth. Noelle sat down. She didn't need to say another word. The silence coming from the defense table was louder than any closing argument. Judge Patterson adjusted her robe. She looked at the mountain of evidence Noelle had built. The fake letter, the salary graphs, the photos, the voicemail. I have heard enough. Judge Patterson said, I am ready to issue a ruling on the division of assets and the divorce petition. She paused, looking at Ethan with cold disdain. However, given the testimony regarding the forged corporate documents and the potential investment fraud, I am also directing the clerk to forward the transcript of these proceedings and all exhibits to the District Attorney's Office and the Financial Crimes Division. This court deals with the dissolution of marriages. Mr. Mercer, we do not deal with grand larceny, but I will make sure the people who do are very well informed. She banged the gavel. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. I looked at Ethan one last time. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the door, realizing that walking out of this courtroom didn't mean he was free. It just meant he was moving to a smaller, darker cage. I took a deep breath. The air in the courtroom tasted different now. It didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like justice. Judge Patterson's voice did not boom. It sliced through the courtroom air with the precision of a scalpel, dissecting the last 5 years of my life into percentages and legal mandates. Based on the forensic evidence presented, she read from the document before her, looking over the rim of her glasses. The court finds that the plaintiff, Mrs. Lawson, was the primary financial contributor to the marital estate. The court further finds that the defendant, Mr. Mercer, engaged in a systematic dissipation of marital assets for purposes contrary to the marriage. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle on Ethan's slumped shoulders. Therefore, the court grants the divorce on the grounds of adultery and constructive desertion. Regarding the asset division, the court awards Mrs. Lawson 100% of the funds currently held in the escrow account, totaling $650,000, as reimbursement for her salary contributions and compensation for the funds misappropriated by the defendant. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since that day at the airport. It wasn't just about the money, it was the validation. The law had looked at my math and agreed that I was not crazy. I was right, the judge continued. Furthermore, Mr. Mercer is ordered to pay legal fees for the plaintiff and a penalty for the distress caused by his fraudulent financial activities. Any equity remaining in the Montreal property is awarded to Mrs. Lawson, though I suspect, given the pending investigations, that asset may soon be seized by Canadian authorities. The gavel came down. It was a sharp, final sound. Ethan did not look at me. He sat there, staring at his hands, while Mr. Sterling packed his briefcase with the speed of a man who knew he wasn't getting paid anytime soon. The aftermath played out not with fireworks, but with the quiet, crushing gears of bureaucracy turning in my favor. 2 weeks after the verdict, I received a formal letter from the Canadian government, forwarded by Inspector Thorne. It stated in no uncertain terms that I was cleared of all suspicion regarding the investment scheme. The promissory notes the angry man at the coffee shop had waved in my face were forensically proven to be forgeries. The signature was a clumsy trace job, and the identification numbers were pure fiction. Ethan, on the other hand, was not so lucky. His passport was flagged. The investors he had lured into his scheme were filing civil suits. The condo in Montreal, his dream escape pod, was frozen by the authorities as proceeds of crime. His plan to disappear for 2 years and live off my savings had collapsed before he even unpacked his boxes. I was in the kitchen, finally throwing away the last box of his things. When my phone rang, it was him. I hesitated. Noel had told me I didn't have to answer. The war was over. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I wanted to hear what a defeated man sounded like. I answered but said nothing. "Alice?" His voice came through, sounding small and hollow, like he was speaking from inside a tin can. "I am here," I said. "I just wanted to say—" He started, and then stopped. I heard him take a ragged breath. "I never hated you. That is nice to know," I replied, staring at the empty spot on the floor where his favorite armchair used to be. "I just needed security," he mumbled. His voice dropped to a whisper, stripped of all the charm and arrogance he had worn like a suit of armor. "I married you because you were a source of stable income. You were safe. You were the safety net while I tried to hit a home run." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. He hadn't wanted a partner. He had wanted an insurance policy. I know. I said, I didn't ask him how he was. I didn't ask him what he was going to do. I simply pressed the red button and ended the call. That was the closure. Not a scream, but a click. I didn't celebrate by buying champagne or going on a vacation. That felt too frivolous for the gravity of what I had survived. Instead, I celebrated with logistics. I called a locksmith. This time, I didn't just rekey the locks. I replaced the entire door. I wanted a heavy oak door with a brass handle that felt solid in my hand. Then, I drove to a small commercial building on the edge of Old Town. It was a dusty space with big windows that looked out onto the street. I met the landlord and took a pen out of my purse. I signed the lease. It wasn't for a revenge plot. It was for a boutique logistics consulting firm. My own firm. For 5 years. I had managed everyone else's chaos while my husband managed my money. Now, I was going to manage my own empire. I looked at the signature on the lease. Alice Lawson. It looked strong. 6 months later, on a Tuesday evening, there was a knock at my new front door. I checked the camera feed. A man was standing there. He wore a coat that looked 2 sizes too big and gray trousers that were frayed at the hems. His hair was thinning, and his posture was stooped. It took me a full 5 seconds to realize it was Ethan. I opened the door, but I didn't step back to let him in. I stood in the threshold, blocking the warmth of my home from the chill of the evening air. He looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like a man who had been sleeping on couches and dodging process servers. "Alice," he said. His voice cracked. I was in the neighborhood." He looked past me, trying to see into the house, trying to see if there was still a place for him in the warmth. "I have nowhere to go," he whispered. "Vera kicked me out. The accounts are still frozen. I just need a place to crash for a few days, just until I get back on my feet." I looked at him. I searched inside myself for anger. I searched for hatred. I searched for the heartbreak that had nearly drowned me at the airport. I found nothing. He was just a stranger who looked vaguely like someone I used to know in a past life. "I am sorry," I said, and my voice was polite, distant. "I can't help you." "But Alice," he pleaded, stepping forward, "we were married. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means I learned a lesson," I said. I stepped back and started to close the door. "Alice, please," he called out, desperation rising in his voice. I closed the door. The heavy oak clicked shut, sealing out the noise, the cold, and the past. I turned around and walked back into my living room. On the table lay the keys to my new office. I picked them up. I had a meeting tomorrow with my first major client. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at myself. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a divorcee. I walked out to my car, drove to my new office, and unlocked the glass door. I flipped the sign in the window from closed to open. As the sunlight hit the floorboards, I thought about the $650,000 sitting in my bank account. I did not rob him. I did not steal. I simply repossessed the years I had paid for with my salary, with my blind trust, and with the most expensive lesson of my life. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to get to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment down below and tell me where you are tuning in from today so we can connect and share our experiences. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.